You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Okay, we're going to talk about Trump v. Barbara, and the Supreme Court has ruled against President Trump and his executive order, which changed substantially the idea of birthright citizenship that the Supreme Court had ruled on previously in 1898.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
And we're live from the living room as Doug eyes up the matchday spread. He's reaching for the buffalo wing. Perfect! Hang on, what's this? Oh, he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! Incredible! What a finish! Sensational combination! Look at the delight on his face. There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi. Food deserves Pepsi. Grab a pack of Pepsi Zero Sugar for today's match. It's poetry in motion.
In the decision of Wong Kim Ark, which we've talked about here, Wong Kim Ark was a Chinese-American laborer, lived in the United States for some time working. His parents were born in China, he in the United States, and he wanted to stay. And the Supreme Court said that he could because of concepts that we'll talk about. The two juices, jus soli and jus sanguinis is the best way. Trump v. Barbara. So who is Barbara? This is a pseudonym, and very often in the Supreme Court will use pseudonyms in cases where it involves children or around it, if there's any kind of sexual abuse or pregnancy. In this case, the cases involve pregnancy. Barbara is a citizen of Honduras, currently resides in New Hampshire with her husband and 3 minor children. Her asylum application is pending with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. And she has resided in the United States since 2024. Her husband, the father of her children, is not a new U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident. They're expecting a 4th child on October 5th, 2025. And Barbara plans to seek for her child's Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, the SNAP program, Medicaid, and other benefits for which citizens are eligible. She had standing for this matter. And there's 4 other cases that brought the lawsuit, helped by the ACLU and other organizations. So first of all, I believe the term birthright citizenship is just a wrong way of saying it. I do realize that loosely the term is anchored in the Wong Kim Ark decision. They do not put those 2 words together, but you see, there's a birthright citizenship concept. It's one of those terms that's not helpful for understanding. Another way of looking at it is jus soli or jus sanguinis, which is it, are you a citizen by where you were born, the land, or are you a citizen by who you are, your DNA, your blood? Almost the entire Americas, almost every nation in this hemisphere goes by jus solis, which is the land you were born in. So countries, not just America, countries like Canada, country like Argentina, Brazil, these are big immigrant nations in addition to the United States, use this concept because the idea is that we were lands of opportunity, we were democracies, there aren't 2 types of citizens here. We do have non-citizens, but there aren't 2 types of citizens. You're not a certain person because of who you are. And in other nations, say France, it's done a little differently, although they have a lot of exceptions and there are some jus solis type concepts with it. But in France, generally, you're going to want to see that one of your parents is a French citizen to claim French citizenship. And the United Kingdom changed its policy in 1983 to move more towards that. This was part of the arguments of the government, but the United States, we don't tend to, up until recently, I guess, we don't tend to look to Europe and say, we want some of that. We're always America, right? We're the democracy. We're the shining example. If anything, we look at our our fellow countries, the Mexico, the Brazil, the Canada, and this is the way the Americas act. But in any case, we also have constitutional considerations. You can't do anything if it's in the Constitution if it hasn't been amended. So the 14th Amendment is very clear. Or is it? That's what the government wanted to say. Or is it? Let's just read it here. Plain text of the Constitution says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. The 14th Amendment is done at the time of the Reconstruction after the Civil War. Some newly admitted southern states are encroaching on the rights of people who are no longer in slavery but are free African-American citizens and creating new laws for them. There is also a concern that they wanted to address at the constitutionally anchored level that there wasn't two types of citizens, that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. You can't take that away. Because prior to that, Dred Scott is what they're arguing against. The Supreme Court in Dred Scott said that because someone's ancestors came on a slave ship, they weren't a citizen of the United States. And that's really what it does. What the government argued in Trump v. Barbara is that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, gives a two-part requirement of citizenship. And in a concept of birthright citizenship, U.S. practice has largely adopted over the years, and that the Trump administration thought was wrong. I mean, it leads to disastrous consequences according to the government's argument. That we're only looking at that first part, and we're not applying the second. So there's a two-part test. So subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And there's two concepts that they use to establish this subject to the jurisdiction. You know, what makes a U.S. citizen subject to the U.S. jurisdiction? And they would use two concepts: domicile, like do they have a home here, and allegiance. Is their primary allegiance with the United States? Here's the government's argument. A substantial body of historical evidence confirms that U.S. citizenship does not extend to the children of parents who were in the country, and they say in intere, traveling through, abiding here for temporary purposes, for health or occasional businesses. That's a comment made by a Supreme Court justice in 1834, Joseph Story. You know, citizenship does not extend to the children of parents who are just traveling here occasionally for work. Here's what the government says. As Justice Story wrote, a person owes allegiance to the country in which he is domiciled. An individual places himself out of the protection of his former country and becomes a member of the new society, at least as a permanent inhabitant, and is kind of a citizen, but is nevertheless united and subject to the society. Once someone has fixed his abode in another country, he becomes a member of that society. So they're drawing a line here, and in President Trump's executive order, which comes from January 20th, 2025, his first day, it provides that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution excludes from birthright citizenship people who were born in the United States but not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and argues that beginning February 19th, no department or agency of the United States shall issue documents recognizing United States citizenship or accept documents issued by state, local, or other governments purporting to recognize United States citizenships to persons in two circumstances. When that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States and the person's father was not a United States citizen or a lawful permanent resident. Or, number two, when that person's mother's presence in the United States was lawful but temporary, and the person's father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. That was their argument. Courts, lower courts found this argument, rejected this argument. So the government brought it to the Supreme Court. And as we now know, Trump v. Barber decided on June 30th, 2026. The Supreme Court rejected this executive order, said it was unconstitutional. You do have to talk about it. It's a 6-3 decision, but you do have to talk about it concurring. So it's really a 5-4 decision at heart, at core, with agreeing to all those parts, but with 6-3, with Kavanaugh's concurring opinion, agreeing to the action of restoring citizenship to this child of Barbara, just like the other justices, but having different reasons. Let's talk about Roberts, who wrote the decision first. He traced the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment from English common law, the rejection of Dred Scott that we talked about, and emphasized that the 14th Amendment established citizenship by birth on soil. Regardless of your race, your blood, your ancestry, your DNA, it reaffirmed the long-standing interpretation from Wong Kim Ark. The interesting thing is that the government, by the time this case reaches the Supreme Court, does not want to overturn Wong Kim Ark. They don't think they need to. They just want to reinterpret it a bit. Children born in the United States, with the exception of narrow exceptions, such as children of foreign diplomats, children of, let's say, Prince William comes and has another kid in the United States. Like, no, visiting leaders, occupying enemy forces. These people are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and that's all it means. And it's a narrow definition that Roberts, the respondents to this petition, and others believe is exactly what those Republicans in the Congress in 1868 who were developing the 14th Amendment wanted to say. So during the oral arguments, it didn't seem like it. This doesn't surprise me, by the way. It didn't seem like it was going the government's way. Skeptical justices during oral argument. And you saw an inability of the conservative side of the bench, which is really getting to be the ultra-conservative versus the moderate conservative side of the Supreme Court. You saw an inability of them to get some traction on any kind of argument. You know, it's funny because with the World Cup games, FIFA going on, I can't help but a comparison to soccer. Like in soccer, what you want to see usually is the team will get the ball, and then you just see this moment, if you've been following these games, where you'll see like four guys running in unison, like on the attack. And you kind of want to have that if you're going to score a goal. It's very rare that just one player will run up, score a goal, because it's a team sport and you have to do things like crosses and, headshots and things that will work better when you're in a team. And in a Supreme Court oral argument, you sort of want to see that too. There's a kind of like build up, an attack that goes on with some kind of a position. In this case, it was around the domicile and the allegiance arguments, like that really what the framers of the 14th Amendment and what law since then, because they said even after Wong Kim Ark, there were still people using domicile arguments, like where you live. You have a house here, then maybe you're a citizen. You have allegiance to us, then you're a citizen. It's not just that you were born here, and that you were in the country for 2 days. You're born here, and then you're a citizen. And they were trying to get that going, and you just didn't see that kind of momentum that was going to score a goal, meaning the kind of argument that was going to get some people from the moderate conservative side over to the conservative side, and they ended up in dissent. So you had Alito and Gorsuch, Thomas in dissent.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Hey guys, today I'm interviewing my cat about his Perfect Bistro food. Percy, you seem to be a big Perfect Bistro fan. Care to comment? Totally. What do you like about it? You love the high-quality ingredients? And the delicious flavors, of course. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Listen to Percy, guys. Visit perfectbistro.com to try it for your cat.
It's an interesting court in that, there is a lot of activity in this court. It seems to rotate between Barrett, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh as to which one's going to sometimes side with the three more liberal justices and Roberts. I also think it's not like the court determining this. The government, the Trump administration, is throwing things at them that are pretty radical. Like, I think this could be considered, this birthright citizenship, not something that George W. Bush and his administration was going to address at the Supreme Court. It's a pretty radical thing. So you're going to get a reaction even from some of the Trump-appointed or more conservative justices. But it is interesting to see the rotation on some of these. So Gorsuch will come in on some issues where there might be a more libertarian slant, where there might be a little more an agency gone too far. Very reflective of his mother, who was the EPA administrator, but also, wanted to dismantle that agency and thought the agency was going too far. Didn't like what the government was doing with Western lands, nor does he. And he does seem to have a focus on Indians, and Indians are somewhat part of this decision. They're not referenced in the 14th exactly, but they're referenced in the Civil Rights Bill written at the same time as the 14th Amendment, and sometimes used as an indicator of what the language is. So he asked a lot of questions about that. But you see this rotation as to who's going to side with Roberts or who's going to side with Alito and Thomas. And it's interesting to see that rotation. In this case, it was Barrett and Roberts joining the court's three liberals to interpret the Constitution as it has been since Wong Kim Ark. Kavanaugh joins and essentially joins the decision. So Barbara gets citizenship. Barbara's child gets citizenship, and so do the others. So does everyone who is born in the United States. We keep that interpretation. But what Kavanaugh says is he declines to decide at this time that it's a constitutional matter, and uses a principle that you don't have to anchor a court decision in the Constitution if you don't have to. And here, Trump's order is merely at variance with Congress, with federal statute, and it cannot be. So remember when Trump was issuing all these executive orders, and he continues to do so. Other presidents have too. We talked about executive orders, and the one thing I always said is, they're very powerful, but they're only powerful if they're within law. This is where that process happens. So they can be challenged, taken to court. But courts move slow, and so Trump's been able to benefit from issuing executive orders, knowing that it's going to take time for the courts to catch up in most cases if they don't do an emergency ruling. But anyway, here's an example. So Kavanaugh is just simply saying that order is against federal statute, so it fails. And so, in effect, he joins the majority. But where that might matter is if Congress ever in the future wanted to pass a anti-birthright citizenship law, then he's signaling that perhaps, he's not guaranteeing, but he's signaling that perhaps he would go along with that and hold it up as constitutional. But, that and $3 will get you right on the subway, because a Supreme Court justice can do whatever they want, essentially. So he could always, whatever he writes in these concurring opinions or dissents, he could always go back on that. And it'll be brought up like, Justice Kavanaugh, you said this and this, but, when you have a full case in front of you, things can change. What else? Neil Gorsuch also wrote a concurring decision. So what he felt is that the majority was too quick to drop the concerns of the government about allegiance and domicile and trace the history of these words, and found that they did mean something at the time of the authorship of the 14th Amendment, and then the interpretation of domicile and allegiance since Wong Kim Ark. He thinks Wong Kim Ark does not completely resolve the question, because that case involved parents who were lawfully residing in the United States. But he cautions that just because an executive order may be constitutional in some applications does not mean every application is constitutional. So this is something that didn't get any news at all. And Gorsuch is just lumped with Alito and Thomas. Didn't get any news. But actually, Gorsuch does depart a little bit at the end of his decision, and I don't know if people have quite noticed this. So even though he's agreeing with the dissent of Alito and Thomas on one hand, that the majority didn't pay enough attention to the argument about domiciles and allegiance and things like that, he does bring up, well, wait a second. If parents who have lived in the United States for years intend to remain permanently and they've built their lives here, like we've seen so many cases where ICE agents come to schools and the parent may not be a citizen but has lived here for 25 years. This is the kind of thing he's talking about. They built their lives here. If they're not domiciled in America, where are they domiciled? And he says, long-standing Supreme Court precedent recognizes that every person must be domiciled somewhere. Domicile's a funny term, and I think it comes up sometimes. I used to be involved in local New Jersey politics, and it comes up sometimes because obviously you can only run for office in a town. This is probably true in every state. You can only run for office in a town or in a county. If you want to be a county commissioner, you have to live there. That's part of democracy, right? You have to be one of the people you're representing. It's kind of funny because it's different in the UK, where somebody chooses where they're going to run and then represents that area. Well, that's not the system we have. And so domicile does come up. So we had, I've seen myself a couple cases where we had people running for school board, say, and they actually had a condo, say it was a person that had gone to the school system in their hometown and their parents still had a house there, but they were, had become successful in their own right and had a condo elsewhere. And that word domicile comes up in cases in my state where they're assessing, does the person live there? You might have two houses, but what's your domicile? And you can only have one. And it's really your primary resident where you actually lay your head. And one of the things that they did in this case was to actually look and see where the guy was, did he have a bed in his parents' home? Like, could they arrive there by surprise and catch him and things like that? So domicile does have a legal meaning, but you can only have one. You have to be domiciled somewhere. So Gorsuch actually appears open to the historical argument that citizenship may turn on allegiance or domicile, but he's skeptical that the government has shown unlawful presence automatically prevents someone from establishing a U.S. domicile. So mark that. Gorsuch is agreeing or not agreeing with Roberts' decision. He's dissenting, but he's also saying, he says it right in his decision, as to the government's contention that all illegals, are not domiciled here, I harbor doubts. That's what he says. I harbor doubts. So that's the Supreme Court decision. Not a surprise for me. Listen to our whole podcast on Wong Kim Ark if you want to get into those whole stories, the Charming Betsy and other cases involving this. But just thought I'd update you.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.